Into the Spider-Verse amazed audiences in 2019 with groundbreaking visuals that brought the comics to life. And Across the Spider-Verse reunites Miles Morales with Gwen Stacy to deal with a new threat to the multiverse, the Spot. And when Gwen takes Miles to the Spider Society, he soon finds that not everyone is on the same page about what it means to be a hero. Please join me in welcoming my panel today, director KEMP Powers, writer-producer Phil Lord, and writer-producer Chris Miller. Before we get into it, let's see a clip. So, Phil and Chris, Into the Spider-Verse, absolutely incredible. Tell me about what you wanted to do with the sequel, with Across the Spider-Verse.
Well, when your brand is surprise, right, and innovation, it means you have to start over because you can't run it back. So I think we all got together and said, what's something even more ambitious? How could we create like looks and worlds that are completely surprising in animation and they're groundbreaking as equally as the previous movie, but really it was about how can we go deeper in the characters' relationships? How can we make this film a more complete emotional experience?
Yeah, when we, what really we're trying to think about is like what's the next step of Miles growing up and becoming an adult. And I'm a parent of a teenager and a tween, and my relationship with them has evolved from when they were young. And I think what's really important to know is that this movie ends up being a coming of age story, not just for the young people, but also for the parents as well.
Now, Kemp, you joined for this film. Can you talk about joining to expand the multiverse for this?
Well, it's interesting because when Phil and Chris, I was actually working on Soul, the previous movie, when the first Spider-Verse came out. And thank you. Nice. And these guys brought it down to up to Pixar. And first when I saw it, this is before the film even came out, I was like, oh man, we gotta really like up our game because this shit is crazy. But I came on board, and when Phil and Chris pitched it to me, the variety of characters wasn't what was drawing me in. It really was the evolution of Miles. Like Miles Morales, I also have a son who's now 19. So while we were in production on this film, I was going through a lot of the stuff that Jefferson goes through in this film. And I realized that for my son and a lot of young people, Miles Morales was their only Spider. Like they knew Miles Morales as Spider-Man more than my generation knew Peter Parker as Spider-Man. And I was really, really excited by this idea of you can get lost in these movies when you have all these colorful characters and you lose the thread of the main character. And we had a really cool story discussion where it was like every character in this film is there in service of Miles' journey. And that's something that was like really, really exciting to me because I knew the challenges we were gonna have, not only introducing all these new characters, but the characters that weren't gonna be there from the first one, and the scope and scale of it, which to be perfectly honest was like the biggest scale movie I've ever been exposed to. Like one of the things about animation that when people see an animated film, a lot of times they don't know what they're seeing, And I found this on Soul, I found it on this film. When I'm explaining to people, I'm like, this movie is big. Like this movie is like Star Wars big. And people don't realize that because it's animated. And I'm like, to have a film that big and not lose sight of this kid in Brooklyn and his family and his growing pains was to me like the biggest, most unique challenge that made me the most excited about getting on board on the film.
Look, the films that we admire and grew up like and really pattern this off of are films like Lawrence of Arabia, right? I mean, this is a movie about like nothing is written, right? And so those movies are like this one. Like this is the most ambitious animated film ever attempted. It has 1,000 artists working on it. It is like a big, giant, epic Hollywood production. It is that, right? But it is ultimately so focused on character, performance, relationships. That's what makes it connect with an audience as big as those big epics.
I mean, I'm so excited that the SAG strike is finally over, because something that people haven't been able to talk much about is the ensemble we assembled for this film. And I mean, and it really was pretty much one of the most incredible ensembles of dramatic and comedic actors having to like get together and play off of one another. In fact, with animation, so often you shoot actors alone in a booth. And we were kind of so inspired by our cast in this film that often we would put actors together, which you often don't do. And I think the end result to that are the quality of the performances that you end up seeing in the film.
Speaking about these important character relationships, you actually start the film off with Gwen, kind of giving a recap of the first film and going through her story. Where did that idea come from?
Well, we felt like we really wanted to understand where Gwen was coming from. In the first film, we only saw her through Miles' eyes, and she seemed like this cool, very competent person. But she has a lot going on as well, and so we wanted to set the world, start the movie starting in her world. And it was an opportunity to show a whole different style of animation. So her world has this sort of watercolor, hand-painted, sort of drippy aesthetic that it changes with her mood. We've called it like a living mood ring. So whatever she was feeling, that was the color and the environment around her. And so we thought it was a great opportunity to get and see what was going on with her, where she's presenting as cool, calm, and together, but actually she's vulnerable and going through as much difficulty as Miles.
It also felt like the most surprising way to open the movie. She opens the movie by saying, like, let's do it differently this time. And so we thought, like, let's spend the first reel with Gwen. And like these techniques, you know, first movie we taught the computer how to draw, this movie we taught it how to paint. You know, which meant that like all of our tools are just there to you know, reveal the reason this movie feels bespoke is because it is. Every single pixel you see is something handcrafted by a person. And right, the people make these movies. And it's in service of the internality of this like young teenager and what is she experiencing and how when she moves through the world, it bends to her and how she feels. And could we give the audience a subjective experience like that? So like where you get in her head and now you understand where she's coming from. And that's our objective with all these characters and all this whiz-bang stuff. Can we give you a first-person experience so you get closer to somebody that you would never be able to understand otherwise?
They're very...
Not just, we have this amazing like Oscar-winning like mixer Mike Smanek, but like it means that every single craft has to be like growing in the same direction from start to finish. And it just means that like the conversations that happen in these rooms, they are about, you know, they are about story. You know, they're about like what is going to, like what sound effect, what whip sound will be the most, will convey that Miles has matured since the last movie. That's the amount of level of craft and detail that goes into this stuff.
And there's like a chicken and egg quality to it also where, you know, we're making a storyboard for the sequence, and then we have Daniel Pemberton, genius composer who did the score, make the drum track and the beautiful opening song, and then we have to animate it to the music. So it goes back and forth, and it's like an amazing collaboration between incredible artists.
Now I've seen this film so many times at this point, three of which before I found out I needed to do this panel. Did you have a favorite new Spider-Man? And I ask this because I particularly love Peter Parked Car.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Spider-Punk was a really great addition. And it was both Daniel Kaluuya, his incredible performance, and as a character, both visually and storytelling-wise, I think he was one of the biggest challenges. We've talked about this a lot before, but that was a character that really had to like earn its way into the film. Like it was a very cool concept that very quickly after we met Daniel and he kind of threw questions back at us, we realized, oh man, we didn't think this through very well. So like Daniel kind of as a performer pushed us to develop the character to the level it needed to be for him to commit to the part, really. And look, I've got a lot of personal reasons. I just, loving punk music, loving Daniel's natural speaking voice, because when we were conceptualizing the character, we were listening to interviews of Daniel Kaluuya. And it was just like, I really hope he actually says yes to do this, because we're designing a character based on this guy's energy when he's doing interviews. And most of the performances we see of his, he's doing other accents. And it was like, no, we're kind of like, so when we first met him and he said, well, where's this character from? Do you guys remember? He was like, well, where are you from? And he said Camden. It was like, that's where this character's from. He's from wherever the hell you're from.
But also, like, Camden Town, when you go to London, like, that's where you go to buy all, like, the punk swag.
Yeah.
And
it was
so,
a great coincidence.
It was a great coincidence. It's like, that's what Camden's really like. This isn't like, so he's like so authentically punk as a person, and we're like, we need to make a character in our story that's as punk rock as Dan Kaluuya, right? And so the other thing about it is it's a tremendous screenwriting challenge, because, this movie, Miles, like, loses the entire time. Like, people betray him, he makes mistakes, he, like, thinks he gets home, he doesn't, right? But what's going on is we needed to find ways that, like, his character is developing so that it feels satisfying. Miles is actually learning and growing the entire movie, right? And the fulcrum of that is Hobie. And when we didn't have Hobie in the movie, like, Miles never made an ally. And we were like, we need him to find someone who says, like, I like what you're doing, let me give you a clue about how to take this further. And basically give him that, like, punk energy that Miles needs to, like, complete the story and understand his own strength. And then by the end of the movie, he's telling Mom.
And the irony of having it be the person that starts with the person that he thinks he's going to hate the most because he's cooler than him, he's got a great relationship with the girl that he likes, he seems like he's going to be really know-it-all and going to be getting in his way, and he ends up being the only person who really believes in him and really has his back when the chips are down.
I wish we had an hour to talk about this film. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank my Lord and Chris Miller. And if you haven't seen the film, seriously, see it. It's so good.